The boarding lane at JFK International set the stage for a spectacular miscalculation. A gate agent, wrapped in the petty authority of her uniform, looked at a black woman in an immaculate suit and told her to move to the back of the economy line. The agent believed she was simply putting someone in their place. What she didn't know was that her target, Dr. Serafina Hayes, was the CEO of the company whose software formed the very consciousness of the aircraft she was boarding. This is the incredible story of how that one moment of public discrimination triggered a corporate takedown, grounding a multi-million-dollar jet and ending careers with a single silent command. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 hummed with a unique blend of anxiety and anticipation. It was a symphony of rolling suitcases, garbled final boarding calls, and the faint, greasy scent of Cinnabon clinging to the recycled air. Through this river of human chaos moved Dr. Serafina Hayes, an island of serene composure. She was dressed not in the typical athleisure of the modern traveler, but in a bespoke charcoal gray pantsuit, the fabric whispering of Savile Row tailoring. Her hair was styled in intricate locks adorned with subtle gold cuffs that caught the harsh terminal lighting. At 42, she carried an aura of quiet, unshakable authority, an authority earned not through inheritance, but forged in the brutal crucibles of MIT lecture halls and Silicon Valley boardrooms. Serafina was the founder and CEO of Ethelred Aeronautics, a name that, while not a household brand like Apple or Google, was spoken with something approaching reverence in the circles that mattered defense aerospace and global logistics. Ethelred designed the bleeding-edge avionics and logistics software that was quite literally the central nervous system for a growing number of the world's most advanced aircraft, both commercial and private. To the pilots and engineers who used it, Ethelred's Odyssey system was the gold standard, a complex digital tapestry that managed everything from engine performance and fuel consumption to flight path optimization and real-time threat assessment. It was, to put it simply, the brain in the machine. Her destination was London for a series of meetings that would finalize the acquisition of a smaller British tech firm, a move that would solidify Ethelred's dominance in the European market. Her first-class ticket on Global Wings Airlines, flight GW710, was not a luxury. It was a necessity, a tool that allowed her to arrive rested and ready to command a room. She approached the priority boarding lane for Gate B23. A large sign clearly delineated the lanes, first class and diamond medallion, on the left, main cabin on the right. The first-class lane was nearly empty, save for a family gathering their things. The economy line snaked back almost to the duty-free shop, a long, shuffling queue of weary travelers. Serafina stepped into the empty priority lane, pulling her slim, elegant Rimowa carry-on behind her. She was immediately intercepted by the gate agent, a woman in her late 50s with a helmet of sprayed blonde hair and a name tag that read Brenda. Brenda's smile was a thin, tight slash of coral lipstick, and it did not reach her eyes. "Honey, you seem a little lost," Brenda said, her voice laced with a cloying, condescending sweetness. She gestured with a pen towards the sprawling economy line. "That line, the one for the main cabin, starts way back there." Serafina paused. She was used to microaggressions, the subtle and not-so-subtle paper cuts of prejudice that were a daily reality. She typically handled them with cool, disarming professionalism. She offered a polite, neutral smile. "Thank you, but I'm in the correct lane. I'm flying first class." Brenda's eyes did a slow, deliberate scan of Serafina from her gold-adorned locks down to her expensive but understated loafers. It was a look that stripped away the PhD, the CEO title, the Forbes 40 under 40 accolades, and saw only a black woman it had decided was out of place. "Boarding pass!" Brenda snapped, the sweetness gone, replaced by the clipped tone of a petty tyrant wielding her sliver of power. Serafina calmly unlocked her phone and pulled up the digital boarding pass, the bold letters "Class First" and "Seat 1A" clearly visible. She held it out. Brenda squinted at the screen, her lips pursed. "Sometimes there are glitches with the app," she said, her skepticism practically dripping into the air. "I'll need to see your ID to confirm." It was a ridiculous, unnecessary request. No one else in the priority lane was being asked for ID at this stage. But Serafina, maintaining her composure, reached into her briefcase and produced her driver's license. Brenda took it, holding it up to the light as if it were a suspected forgery. She compared the face on the ID to the woman standing before her. "Hayes," she mumbled, sounding out the name. She handed it back without apology. All right, but you still have to wait. We're pre-boarding passengers with disabilities and families with small children right now. This was a bald-faced lie. The family that had been in the lane was already on the jet bridge, and the agent at the scanner was waving the next passengers through. A white man in a rumpled suit, clearly smelling of airport bar whiskey, strode past them and had his ticket scanned without a second glance from Brenda. I believe you're mistaken, Serafina said, her voice still level, but now with a new edge of steel. General boarding for first class has begun. That gentleman just boarded. It was at this moment that a man from the economy line standing near the front decided to insert himself. He was in his late 30s with a slicked-back undercut, wearing a tight-fitting polo shirt that strained against his biceps. He had the overconfident swagger of a man who lists crypto investor in his social media bio. Hey, lady, just listen to her, he called out, his voice loud and obnoxious. Rules are rules. Don't try to pull a fast one. We've all been waiting patiently. A few other people in the economy line nodded in agreement, swayed by his confidence and Brenda's official-looking uniform. The narrative was set. A woman trying to cut the line was being put in her place. Brenda felt emboldened by the support. She turned her back on Serafina, a clear gesture of dismissal. You'll have to wait until your zone is called, she said over her shoulder. Please step out of the lane. The humiliation was now public. Serafina stood there in her $1,000 suit holding a ticket for the most expensive seat on the plane and was being treated like a stowaway. Her patience, a deep and usually unshakable reservoir, was finally running dry. This was no longer a microaggression. It was a blatant public display of disrespect, fueled by racial and class-based prejudice. I would like to speak to your supervisor, Serafina stated. It was not a request. Brenda rolled her eyes theatrically. Fine. She sighed as if dealing with a petulant child. She spoke into her walkie-talkie. Henderson got a situation at B-23. Passenger refusing to follow boarding procedures. A few minutes later, Mr. Henderson arrived. He was a man who seemed to be assembled from mismatched parts, a paunchy midsection, a thin neck, and a head that seemed too small for his body. He wore a slightly too tight suit and a perpetual expression of beleaguered importance. He didn't make eye contact with Serafina. He spoke directly to Brenda. What's the problem here? This woman, Brenda began gesturing at Serafina as if she were an inanimate object, is insisting on boarding with first class, but I've told her she needs to wait. She's holding everything up. Henderson finally turned his gaze to Serafina. He didn't ask for her side of the story. He didn't ask to see her boarding pass. He saw a black woman and his flustered white employee, and he made his calculation. Ma'am, he said, his voice oozing a false patronizing authority. I'm sure we can sort this out, but my agent is simply following procedure. To keep things moving, I must ask you to step aside. If there's an issue with your ticket, we can look at it after the flight has boarded. After the flight has boarded, Serafina repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. My seat is 1A. The flight will not depart without me. The issue is not with my ticket. The issue is with your staff's conduct. The man from the economy line, now fully invested in the drama, shouted, Just go to the back of the line. You're not special. Let's call him Chad. Mr. Henderson gave Chad a slight appreciative nod before turning back to Serafina. Ma'am, I'm not going to argue. You can either step out of the line or we can have Port Authority security escort you from the gate. Your choice. It was the final straw. The threat. The utter refusal to even consider that she might be in the right. Serafina's entire life had been a battle against assumptions, against people like Brenda and Henderson, who looked at her and saw anything but what she was. She had fought with intellect, with grace, with relentless hard work. But today at this gate, grace had failed. Intellect had been dismissed, so she would use power. She looked at Henderson, then at Brenda, and then at the smirking face of Chad in the crowd. She held their gaze for a long moment, letting the silence hang heavy and uncomfortable in the air. Then she gave the signal. It was almost imperceptible. She lifted her left hand, glancing at the Patek Philippe watch on her wrist, as if checking the time. With her right index finger, she tapped the crystal face 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. To anyone watching, it looked like a nervous tick, an impatient gesture. To her executive assistant David, who was monitoring her biometrics and travel status from Ethelred's 24/7 command center in Austin, Texas. It was a code Sierra, a prearranged signal for a specific drastic action. Serafina lowered her hand, a profound and unnerving calm settling over her features. She took a single step back out of the priority lane. "Fine," she said, her voice as smooth and cold as polished marble. "I'll wait." Brenda smirked, victorious. Henderson nodded, satisfied. Chad and the crowd let out a little whoop of triumph. They thought they had won. They had no idea that she hadn't just stepped out of the line. She had just grounded the entire damn flight. For about 90 seconds, everything seemed normal. The boarding process continued. The triumphant smirk remained plastered on Brenda's face. Mr. Henderson gave her a subtle "good job" nod and began to walk away his duty as a middle manager, quashing a minor rebellion seemingly done. Chad, the loudmouthed passenger, had already forgotten about it, scrolling idly through his phone. Serafina, for her part, did not move to the back of the economy line. Instead, she walked to a deserted cluster of seats by a window overlooking the tarmac and the magnificent Boeing 737 that was supposed to be her chariot to London. She sat down, crossed her legs, and pulled a sleek, ultra-thin laptop from her briefcase. As the machine booted up, the logo of Ethelred Aeronautics glowed softly on its lid. She began to type, her fingers flying across the keyboard with silent efficiency. She was not angry. She was not flustered. She was a CEO, and this was now a business problem. The first sign that something was wrong came not with a bang, but with a crackle. The gate agent scanning the tickets, a young man named Leo, frowned at his screen. The handheld scanner beeped with an error he'd never seen before, a red banner with the word "Operational Hold." He tried scanning the next passenger's ticket. Same result. Brenda," he called out, his voice uncertain. "System's lagging or something. I can't process any more tickets." Brenda strolled over, annoyance etched on her face. "Just reboot it. Honestly, the tech they give us." She fiddled with the machine, confident in her diagnosis. But the red banner remained. A sinking feeling began to bubble in her stomach. At that exact moment, inside the cockpit of Flight GW710, Captain Michael Corrigan, a veteran pilot with 25,000 flight hours, was running through his final pre-flight checklist. His first officer, a younger but highly competent pilot named Ben, was monitoring the engine startups. "Okay, FMS initialization," Corrigan said. Ben tapped a command into the flight management system. Nothing happened. He tapped it again. The screen, usually displaying a complex array of flight data from the Ethelred Odyssey system, was frozen on the startup logo. Below it, a line of text blinked in stark amber lettering, "External System Lockout. Awaiting compliance verification from Ethelred Aeronautics." "What the hell is that?" Ben asked, pointing at the screen. Corrigan leaned over. He'd never seen a message like that in his entire 30-year career. It wasn't an error message. It was a gate that had been slammed shut. "Odyssey is locked down," he said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "Something is blocking us from the outside." He immediately got on the radio to the JFK operations tower. "Global Wings Ops, this is Speedbird 710 at Gate B23. We have a full lockout on our avionics suite. I repeat, a full system lockout from Ethelred. We are grounded. Can you advise?" The response from the operations center was a mix of confusion and panic. The message ricocheted up the chain of command at Global Wings Airlines with the speed of a digital wildfire. In a sterile, glass-walled office in the airline's North American headquarters in Queens, a woman named Amelia Davenport, the vice president of North American operations, was in a budget meeting. Her phone, set to vibrate only for level 1 emergencies, buzzed violently against the polished mahogany of the conference table. She excused herself and answered. "Davenport." The voice on the other end was frantic. It was the director of JFK Ground Operations. "Amelia, we have a code red. GW710 to Heathrow is hard grounded. The cockpit is reporting an external lockout on their Ethelred Odyssey system. They're saying the software company locked them out remotely. We can't move, we can't fly. The pilots are saying they've never seen anything like it." Amelia Davenport felt the blood drain from her face. Ethelred Aeronautics. She knew that name intimately. Ethelred wasn't just another vendor. They were a cornerstone partner. Their Odyssey system was being rolled out across Global Wing's entire long-haul fleet, a deal worth a staggering $250 million annually, not including maintenance and support. The CEO of Ethelred was notoriously brilliant and famously private. A woman named Amelia frantically searched her memory. Hayes, Dr. Serafina Hayes. She'd seen her picture in the Wall Street Journal. Why would they do that? Amelia demanded. Is it a system-wide failure? A hack. We don't know, the director stammered, but the lockout code, it's specific to this one aircraft, tail number N772GW. It's not a glitch, Amelia. It looks targeted, deliberate. Amelia's mind was racing. A deliberate software lockdown on a single plane? That was an act of corporate warfare. Had they missed a payment? Was there a contract dispute she was unaware of? She pulled up the Ethelred account on her tablet. Everything was in good standing. No outstanding invoices, no legal notices. It made no sense. Then a new message popped up on her screen. It was an automated alert from the Ethelred system, one she'd never seen before. Alert code Sierra initiated on flight G710. Reason on-site asset dispute. Authorization, CEO Serafina Hayes. Below the alert was the passenger manifest for the flight. Amelia scrolled down, her heart pounding in her chest. And there it was. Hayes, Serafina, seat 1A. The puzzle pieces snapped together with a sickening, terrifying click. The CEO of the company that supplied their mission-critical software, a VIP client worth $250 million a year, was sitting on that plane, or more accurately, not sitting on that plane. And she had personally authorized the lockdown, an on-site asset dispute. That wasn't a technical term, it was a human one. Something had happened at the gate. Get me the gate supervisor for B-23 on the phone. Now, she barked already, grabbing her jacket and sprinting for the door. And find out what the hell happened in that boarding line. Back at gate B-23, the announcement came over the PA system, delivered in the somber, apologetic tone reserved for bad news. Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that flight GW710 to London Heathrow is indefinitely delayed. We are currently experiencing an unforeseen operational issue. We have no further information at this time. A collective groan went through the crowd. Chad the loudmouth was instantly furious. Unforeseen operational issue. I have a 7-figure pitch meeting in London tomorrow. This is unacceptable. He stormed up to the desk, jabbing a finger at Brenda. What's going on? Your little power trip with that woman delayed us so much the plane broke down. Brenda was pale, her earlier confidence completely gone. I don't know. It has nothing to do with that. She stammered, but the seed of doubt was planted. She looked at Henderson, who was now sweating profusely, his tie suddenly feeling like a noose. They both glanced over at the woman sitting calmly by the window, typing on her laptop, seemingly oblivious to the chaos she had unleashed. A cold dread, the kind that precedes a professional catastrophe, began to creep into their bones. They didn't understand how, but they knew with a certainty that chilled them to the marrow that she was the cause. The quiet tapping of her fingers on the keyboard was now louder than all the angry shouts in the terminal. It was the sound of power. It was the sound of karma loading. Amelia Davenport's black corporate town car sliced through the congested Queens traffic, its horn blaring with a privilege she rarely used. Inside, the plush leather interior felt like a cage. She wasn't just on her way to JFK. She was on a damage control mission of apocalyptic proportions. Her phone was pressed so hard against her ear it hurt. On the line was the head of Global Wing's legal department, his voice a frantic buzz of legalese and panicked hypotheticals. The breach of contract clauses alone could bankrupt us. Amelia Ethelred's agreement has a brand integrity stipulation, Article 12, Section B. It allows them to terminate the entire agreement with prejudice if actions by our personnel cause significant public ridicule or reputational harm to their executives. This isn't just a PR issue, it's a potential corporate extinction event. Amelia's mind was a maelstrom of numbers, each one more terrifying than the last. The $250 million annual licensing fee for the Odyssey system was the headline figure, but the true cost was far greater. There was the billion-dollar cost of retrofitting their entire 777 and 787 fleet if they had to rip out Ethelred's integrated software. There was the stock price, which her assistant had just messaged her was already showing signs of a catastrophic after-hours slump based on flight tracking data alone. And then there was her own career, which was currently tied to the wing of a grounded airplane. "Find out who the hell was on duty at Gate B-23, she snarled into the phone, her voice tight with fury. "I want their service records, their complaint histories, everything. I want to know who lit this fire." She hung up and stared out the window as the iconic swooping architecture of the TWA hotel flashed past. She was sprinting now, her expensive but practical heels making sharp, angry clicks on the terminal's terrazzo flooring. She bypassed the snaking security lines with a flash of her executive credentials, ignoring the indignant squawks of other travelers. They were inconvenienced. She was facing a corporate abyss. As she burst into the main concourse for the B gates, the scene that greeted her was exactly what she had dreaded, only worse. The air at Gate B-23 was thick with the toxic humidity of collective anger. A mob of about 50 passengers was pressed against the customer service desk, a multi-headed hydra of frustration. At the center of this storm were two employees. One, a woman with brittle blonde hair, looked shrunken and pale, her earlier bravado having curdled into pure terror. The other, a paunchy man in a rumpled suit, was sweating so profusely his collar had turned a translucent gray. They were babbling, offering useless platitudes that only seemed to infuriate the crowd further. Amelia's eyes, however, were not on them. Her gaze swept the chaotic area, hunting for the calm eye of the hurricane. And then she saw her. Dr. Serafina Hayes was seated by the expansive windows, bathed in the afternoon light, glinting off the fuselage of the very Boeing 777 she held captive. She was a portrait of impossible serenity. Her posture was perfect, her back straight. Her laptop, a slim silver wedge, rested on her lap, its glowing ethyl red logo, a silent, damning accusation. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with a steady, unhurried rhythm. She was not a part of the chaos. She was observing it, a scientist studying the predictable results of a disastrous experiment she had initiated. In that moment, Amelia understood. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was a calculated, strategic maneuver by a woman who wielded power with the precision of a surgeon. Amelia slowed her pace, deliberately smoothing the front of her blazer, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. She was about to step into the most important negotiation of her life, and she needed to project control, even if all she felt was free-falling panic. She approached Dr. Hayes' seat, her footsteps seeming to echo in a pocket of silence only she could feel. The angry hubbub of the crowd seemed to fade into a distant roar. She stopped, a respectful 5 feet away. "Dr. Hayes!" The typing stopped. Serafina's head lifted slowly, her dark eyes locking onto Amelia's. There was no anger in them. There was no satisfaction. There was only a profound, unnerving stillness, the calm of a deep ocean that could swallow a fleet of ships without a ripple. Amelia felt an involuntary shiver run down her spine. "Dr. Serafina Hayes," she said, her voice now softer, imbued with a gravity she hoped conveyed the depth of her sincerity. "My name is Amelia Davenport. I'm the Vice President of North American Operations for Global Wings. I came from our headquarters as soon as I heard. On behalf of every single employee of this airline, from our CEO, Jonathan Pierce, all the way down, I want to offer you my most humble, most profound, and most unreserved apology." The direct, formal address and the sheer rank of the person delivering the apology acted like a sonic deadener. The shouting at the gate desk faltered. Heads turned. The passenger, who had been yelling the loudest, a man in a tight polo shirt who looked like he'd just stepped out of a gym, stopped mid-rant, his mouth agape. A wave of silence rippled outwards from the two women, as everyone, passengers and staff alike, realized this was not a standard customer service interaction. This was something else entirely. Brenda and Henderson stared, their faces transforming from terror to a kind of blank, slack-jawed disbelief. The woman they had dismissed as a line cutter was now being personally attended to by a C-suite executive. "You've been made aware of the situation then, Ms. Davenport," Serafina stated, her voice even and cool. It was not a question, it was a confirmation of fact. "I have been made aware of a catastrophic failure on our part." Amelia corrected, her tone emphatic. "A failure of training, a failure of decency, and a failure of simple human perception. There is no excuse for what happened here. None. It is the single most egregious customer service failure I have seen in my 15 years with this company. I am frankly appalled and ashamed. Serafina's gaze did not soften. She gestured with one elegant hand towards the chaos at the desk. An apology is a start, Ms. Davenport. A word. But look around you. Your company's failure, as you call it, has consequences. This flight is grounded. These people are angry. And my company's reputation is predicated on flawless execution, a standard your employees made it impossible for me to meet today. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. I came to this airport today as a CEO, ready to close a 9-figure acquisition that will employ hundreds of people in London. I came as a partner who entrusts her technology and her safety to your airline. And I came as a passenger who paid a premium for a service of convenience and respect. Your employees decided I was none of those things. They saw my skin and they made a judgment. They decided I was a nuisance who needed to be put in her place. Her voice remained level, but it was now imbued with the unyielding strength of forged steel. I have spent my entire life outworking, outthinking, and outperforming the low expectations of people like your Miss Brenda and your Mr. Henderson. I have built a global corporation on a foundation of merit and data. And data, Ms. Davenport, is what this is about now. The data shows that a public humiliation requires a public correction. The data shows that a financial partnership requires absolute trust. That trust has been broken. So an apology, while appreciated, is insufficient to repair the damage. Amelia felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. This was worse than she thought. Dr. Hayes wasn't looking for compensation. She was looking for restitution. She was looking for a pound of corporate flesh. Tell me what we need to do, Amelia said, her voice barely a whisper. Whatever it is, it's done. Serafina finally granted her a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. The negotiation could now begin. The terms are not complex, she said, but they are non-negotiable. She held up a single finger. First, this flight will not depart until I have a formal letter of apology in my inbox. Not from you, Ms. Davenport, with all due respect. It must come directly from your CEO, Jonathan Pierce. I want him to understand that the rot in his company goes deep enough to threaten its very foundations, and that accountability starts at the top. Amelia didn't hesitate. She pulled out her phone. He's in a board meeting in Chicago. I'll have him pulled out. Consider it done. Serafina held up a second finger. Second, immediate and visible accountability. Your employees, Brenda and Henderson, are to be suspended effective this instant. I want their airport credentials revoked, and I want them escorted from this terminal. A reprimand or a transfer would be an insult. It would signal that their behavior is on some level tolerated. It is not. They are a liability your airline can no longer afford. Amelia looked over at Brenda and Henderson, who were now watching the exchange with the dawning horror of the damned. She felt a flash of pity, which was immediately extinguished by a wave of cold fury. They had done this. Their petty bigotry was about to cost the company billions. They will be gone before you finish your next sentence, Amelia promised, her voice like ice. Third, Serafina said, her voice dropping slightly, drawing everyone in closer. This was the masterstroke. You will use that public address system. You will not use euphemisms like operational issues or unforeseen circumstances. You will tell every passenger here the unvarnished truth. You will announce that Flight GW710 was grounded because of the unprofessional and discriminatory conduct of your staff toward a passenger. The people who witnessed my public humiliation must also witness your public admission of failure. It is the only way to rebalance the scales. Amelia felt the floor drop out from beneath her. It was a demand of breathtaking brutality. It would be an act of ritual corporate self-flagellation broadcast for all to hear. It would be humiliating, unprecedented, and utterly devastating to morale. But as she looked at Dr. Hayes's resolute face, she knew it was also the only way forward. She was being offered a path out of this disaster, and the toll was public shame. It was a price she had to pay. Yes, Dr. Hayes. Amelia choked out, her own pride crumbling to dust. I will make the announcement myself. Excellent, Serafina said, a hint of finality in her tone. Once those 3 conditions are met, I will make one phone call, and your aircraft's central nervous system will be restored. Then, and only then, will I board. She leaned back in her chair, picked up her laptop, and resumed typing, as if the most consequential conversation of Amelia Davenport's life was now nothing more than a concluded business item. Amelia stood frozen for a second, then turned on her heel. Her face, which had been a mask of desperate diplomacy for Dr. Hayes, was now transformed into a visage of pure glacial rage. She marched directly to the gate desk. Brenda and Henderson flinched as she approached. "You two," Amelia began, her voice a low, vicious hiss that no one else could hear. "Give me your ID badges. Now." Brenda fumbled with her lanyard, her hands shaking. "But, Ms. Davenport, it was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Amelia whispered, leaning in closer. "A misunderstanding is getting a drink order wrong. You two didn't have a misunderstanding. You decided to play God with your little slice of authority, and you picked the one human being on this continent you should never ever have crossed. You didn't just insult a passenger, you set fire to a $250 million contract. Your misunderstanding is currently being discussed by our board of directors as a potential trigger for bankruptcy. So give me your damn badges." They handed them over, their faces ashen. "Go to the staff room behind the desk and wait for airport security," Amelia commanded. "You are suspended indefinitely pending termination. Your careers with this airline are over." They scurried away like frightened mice. Amelia then took a deep breath, picked up the PA microphone, and pressed the button. Her hand trembled, but her voice was steady. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen waiting for flight GW7 she began, her amplified voice cutting through the terminal. "This is Amelia Davenport, Vice President for Global Wings. I am speaking to you now to offer a sincere apology and a full explanation for this unacceptable delay." She paused, feeling hundreds of pairs of eyes on her. "Your flight has not been delayed by a mechanical problem or a weather event. The delay was caused solely by the unacceptable and discriminatory behavior of our gate staff, who failed to treat a passenger with the dignity and respect she deserved. Our company failed her, and in doing so, we have failed all of you. We are taking immediate and decisive action to address this shameful lapse in our professional standards. We deeply regret this incident and the significant inconvenience it has caused you." A wave of stunned silence rolled across the crowd. Jaws were literally agape. Chad Peterson, the obnoxious heckler, looked as if he'd been punched in the gut. He stared at Serafina, who hadn't even looked up, and the full, terrifying scope of his miscalculation crashed down upon him. A moment later, a soft ping emanated from Serafina's phone. She glanced at it, read the email from CEO Jonathan Pierce, and gave a single satisfied nod. She picked up her phone and made the call. "David," she said simply, "it's handled. Release the Odyssey system for GW710. In the cockpit, the amber warning text vanished as if it had never been there. The flight displays bloomed into life. On the gate agent scanner, the red operational hold banner was replaced by a green ready for boarding. Amelia, looking profoundly relieved, walked back to Serafina. "Dr. Hayes, we are ready for you." "Thank you, Ms. Davenport," Serafina said, closing her laptop and packing it away with unhurried grace. Amelia personally escorted her down the jet bridge, a gesture of deference that did not go unnoticed. As Serafina stepped onto the aircraft, the flight attendants greeted her with wide, almost fearful eyes. She walked to her seat 1A and settled in. A few moments later, the general boarding process began. As the economy passengers shuffled past, their eyes averted, Serafina looked up just once. She made direct eye contact with Chad Peterson, who was trying to shrink himself into invisibility in the line. He froze, his face a mask of clammy terror. Serafina didn't smile. She didn't scowl. She simply held his gaze, her expression a complete and total blank. It was the most terrifying expression he had ever seen. It was the look of someone who had already dismissed him from the universe, who had judged him and found him so utterly insignificant that he warranted no emotion at all. He hurried past, his heart hammering against his ribs, knowing with a cold certainty that he was trapped in a metal tube for the next 7 hours with the woman whose wrath had just brought a global corporation to its knees. The reckoning was over, but the karma was just getting started. The 7-hour flight across the Atlantic was for Dr. Serafina Hayes, a productive pocket of tranquility. The recycled air of the Boeing 777's first-class cabin was charged with a strange new atmosphere. The flight attendants, who had likely received a frantic, all-caps briefing from the ground, treated her with a deference usually reserved for visiting royalty. Her champagne glass was never less than half full. Her requests were met before she could fully articulate them, and they spoke to her in hushed, reverential tones. The other passengers in the rarefied cabin kept their distance, occasionally stealing furtive glances, as if she might ground the plane again mid-flight with another tap of her watch. Serafina paid them no mind. She wasn't gloating. The cold fury that had solidified within her at the gate had already dissipated, replaced by the dispassionate focus of a CEO navigating a complex event. To her, the confrontation hadn't been a personal victory. It was a distasteful but necessary data point. The data indicated a systemic failure within a key business partner. The response was not emotional. It was a logical, albeit drastic, corrective action. While the plane soared at 35,000 feet, she was already wargaming the aftermath. She drafted 3 memos, one to her legal team instructing them to prepare a full analysis of the brand integrity clause in their contract with Global Wings, one to her PR department outlining the exact no-comment stance they were to take, and one to her executive assistant adding a new agenda item to her London schedule, a preliminary meeting with the European VP of a rival airline. When flight GW710 touched down on the damp tarmac of London, Heathrow's Serafina was the first to deplane. She moved through the terminal with the same serene purpose she had shown at JFK, her mind already on the Sterling Innovations acquisition. The drama at Gate B23 was for her a closed chapter, but for those she left in her wake, the book of consequences was just being opened. 2 days later, Brenda sat in a sterile, beige-walled HR office in the Global Wings corporate building in Queens, a place she had only ever visited for mandatory training seminars. Across the polished table sat Amelia Davenport. The frantic, apologetic executive from the airport was gone. In her place was a woman with eyes as cold and hard as riverstones. A grim-faced man from the legal department sat beside her, a thick folder on the table between them. "I don't understand," Brenda stammered, twisting a tissue in her hands. "I've been a loyal employee for 18 years. I was just following procedure." Amelia leaned forward, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Brenda, let me be crystal clear about what you did. You did not follow procedure. You engaged in a pattern of discriminatory harassment against a passenger who, it turns out, is the CEO of our most critical technology partner. Your actions, personally witnessed by me, directly led to the grounding of an aircraft, a public relations catastrophe, an ongoing investigation by the FAA, and as of this morning's market opening, a drop in our stock price that has erased over $400 million of this company's value." Amelia slid a sheet of paper across the table. It was a printout of the Global Wings stock ticker, showing a line that didn't slope downwards so much as fall off a cliff. "So no," Amelia continued, her voice dangerously quiet, "this is not about a misunderstanding. This is about the tangible, devastating financial consequences of your poor judgment. The public announcement I was forced to make at the gate, naming discriminatory conduct as the cause for the delay, has made you a toxic liability. You are being terminated for cause effective immediately. Your severance will be the legal minimum, and we will be contesting your unemployment claim on the grounds of gross misconduct." Brenda stared, her world collapsing in on itself. She tried to argue, to plead, but the words wouldn't come. She was escorted from the building, her personal effects in a cardboard box. The wrongful termination lawsuit she later filed was a pathetic, ill-advised gesture. Global Wings lawyers buried her in discovery, submitting her patchy service record and the damning testimony of Amelia Davenport. The case was dismissed, but the public filing detailing her actions became a permanent stain on her name. She discovered the airline industry was a club, and she had been blacklisted. At interviews with other carriers, she would see the moment the hiring manager typed her name into Google. The friendly expression would freeze, the eyes would harden, and the interview would be politely but firmly concluded. A year later, the prideful gate agent was a ghost. She worked the night shift at a 24-hour pharmacy in Queens, stocking shelves and avoiding eye contact. The power she had once wielded so carelessly was gone, replaced by the crushing anonymity of a life she had never planned for. Henderson's end was quieter, but no less complete. As a manager, he was a more entrenched part of the corporate bureaucracy. Firing him was legally complicated. So the company chose a more insidious punishment. He wasn't terminated, he was entombed. The email arrived on a Monday morning. Subject: corporate restructuring and role reassignment. He wasn't being fired, he was being strategically redeployed to leverage his experience in a new environment. He read the email 3 times, the blood draining from his face. His supervisory role at the world's most important airport was being eliminated. His new position was assistant manager of baggage reconciliation, Des Moines International Airport. It was a corporate death sentence, a one-way ticket to a professional graveyard. He spent his last week in New York packing up his office, a pariah amongst his former colleagues. No one met his eye. They knew what a transfer to Des Moines baggage claim meant. It was a message to everyone else: this is what happens when you fail to manage a crisis. His new office was a windowless cinder block room in the basement of the Des Moines airport, smelling faintly of damp concrete and lost hope. His job consisted of staring at a flickering monitor, tracking the labyrinthine journeys of lost suitcases, and fielding calls from furious passengers. His authority, his career momentum, his pride, all of it had vanished at Gate B23 the moment he chose the path of least resistance and backed his employee instead of seeking the truth. He was a ghost in the machine, a cautionary tale of managerial cowardice. Chad Peterson landed in London feeling rattled but resilient. He told himself the airport incident was just some bizarre fluke. He was a salesman, a closer. He put on his best suit, rehearsed his pitch in the mirror of his hotel room, and swaggered into the gleaming glass and steel headquarters of Sterling Innovations in Canary Wharf. He was shown to a vast minimalist boardroom with a panoramic view of the London skyline. A few minutes later, 2 men entered. One was the CEO, Alistair Finch, a man with a sharp suit and an even sharper smile. The other man, introduced as Sterling's new chief strategy officer, simply nodded and took a seat. "Mr. Peterson," Alistair began, his tone affable. "Thank you for flying all this way. Before you begin, I feel I should give you some context on the exciting developments here at Sterling. As of yesterday, our acquisition by our new parent company was finalized, a major player in the aerospace and logistics technology sector. You may have heard of them, Ethelred Aeronautics." The name hit Chad like a physical blow. The logo on the woman's laptop, the name the VP had uttered with such reverence. His blood ran cold. Alistair's friendly smile dissolved, replaced by something glacial. "Our new CEO, Dr. Serafina Hayes, is a great believer in data and efficiency. She was kind enough to forward me a rather detailed report of her travel experience yesterday. It included a summary of an incident at her departure gate, an incident that was exacerbated by, and I quote, an unnecessarily hostile and belligerent fellow passenger." Alistair slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was a transcript. Chad saw his own words staring back at him. "Just listen to her. Rules are rules. Don't try to pull a fast one. You're not special. Dr. Hayes believes," Alistair continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "that how a person behaves under minor stress is a powerful indicator of their character and judgment. She posits that a man who publicly bullies a woman he assumes has no power is not a man you want as a strategic partner when real challenges arise. And I must say, Mr. Peterson, her data is compelling." Chad felt the room tilt. He opened his mouth, but only a dry croak came out. "The pitch you were about to make was for a partnership to rebrand us for our global expansion under the Ethelred umbrella?" Alistair said, standing up. The chief strategy officer, who hadn't said a word, also stood. "We are looking for partners who embody integrity, respect, and foresight. Based on the comprehensive first-hand data provided by our CEO, it is clear you and your firm possess none of those qualities. This meeting is over. Thank you for your time." Chad stumbled out of the building into the misty London air, his career in ruins. The call to his boss was short and brutal. Having lost the biggest potential client in the firm's history through his own public misconduct, he was fired before his flight back to New York even took off. The day after the Wall Street Journal story broke, Global Wing's board convened an emergency session. The termination of the Ethelred contract was no longer a risk, it was a certainty. Serafina Hayes had all the legal leverage she needed, and she was known for being unsentimental. The formal notice came by a courier a week later. It was a cold, precise legal document, citing Article 12, Section B, terminating the $250 million annual contract. 2 days after that, Ethelred Aeronautics and a competing airline jointly announced a new exclusive 10-year partnership. The financial bleeding for Global Wings was immense. Beyond the stock collapse and the lost contract, they were forced into a groveling, company-wide restructuring of their training and customer service protocols. The final humiliation was the DEI consulting firm they were forced to hire to oversee the changes, a firm handpicked and recommended by Dr. Hayes' office, ensuring her influence would be felt long after the incident was forgotten. Serafina herself never mentioned the event again. She was busy. The Sterling Innovations acquisition was a massive success. From her new London office, she steered Ethelred to another record-breaking quarter. One afternoon, she authorized the final charter for her company's foundation. A new scholarship, the Odyssey Scholars Program, was established with a $10 million endowment to support underprivileged minority women pursuing careers in technology and aviation. She didn't do it for praise. She did it for the same reason she grounded the flight. It was a correction, a necessary adjustment to an equation that was unbalanced. Her single, subtle hand signal at JFK had not been an act of revenge. It was an act of power wielded not just to defend her own dignity, but to create a world where fewer women like her would ever have to. And there you have it, a story that peels back the curtain on the real-world consequences of prejudice. Dr. Serafina Hayes didn't just win an argument, she corrected a system. She proved that the highest price in today's world isn't for a first-class ticket, but for ignorance. The karma that hit Brenda Henderson and Chad wasn't supernatural. It was the direct logical outcome of their own actions, when they finally ran up against someone who could hold them accountable on a global scale. What do you think? Was this justice served or a power move gone too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were shocked by this story and believe that actions should have consequences, hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of justice and karma. Thanks for watching.